In this video, we're going to put together our sent messages activity. Now that will require that we put together our service layer for searching for messages. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Let's go ahead and jump into our service package. I'm going to right click, select new, go to Java class, and I'm going to create a new one called messages. Now, this guy is going to be a public final class with a private constructor, so he can't be instantiated. All right, so let's go ahead and create our request responses. I'll go ahead and implement delete message as well as search message, even though we won't need delete message quite yet, but might as well get it out of the way. So I'm going to say public class delete message request, public int message ID with a constructor. Then I'm going to say public class delete message response extends service response, and no additional return parameters. Then we're going to say public class search messages request. Search messages request will have a public string from contact ID and a public boolean include sent messages with a space, of course, and a public boolean include received messages. And I'm going to create two constructors here. One constructor will take all three parameters. The other constructor will only take two. And that's because not all of our message searches are going to include a from contact ID. Then let's go ahead and create our response. Our response will simply be public class search messages response extends service response, and then I'm going to say public list of messages. All right, so those are our request response objects. So now let's jump into our in-memory package over here, and I'm going to create a new in-memory service. So I'm going to say in-memory messages service, and he, of course, will inherit from base in-memory service and will be required to create that constructor. Let's go ahead and do our delete. Actually, the delete message response, I actually do want something in it. I want a public int message ID in my delete message response. And that's so that when the code that receives this thing, noting that our delete message request was successful, they'll know what message ID was deleted. So let's go ahead and make this a public constructor, not a protected constructor. Let's go ahead and start off by subscribing to public void on delete message. And we're going to say messages.delete message request. And for here, we're going to say messages.delete message response equals new delete message response. And we're going to say response.messageID equals request.messageID. And make sure that we are spelling everything correctly. Why are you... Oh, wow, I totally forgot to mark all these guys as static. So make sure you mark all these classes as static. I was sitting there looking at those errors, like, what? Did I break the JVM or something, or the Java compiler? No, it's just you have to make sure these are marked as static because otherwise they're marked as an inner class. Anyway, and then we will post delayed response. Now let's do our search messages. So that's going to be public void search messages, messages.search messages request. And for this, it's kind of going to be a bit of an annoying one. So let's just go ahead and get it over with, I guess. We'll start off by saying messages.search messages response. We'll start by instantiating our response class. We'll say response equals new search messages response. Then I'm going to say response.messages equals new array list. Then I'm going to create an array of user details. So I'm going to say user details users equals new, or user details array details equals new user details 10. I'm going to say for int I equals 0, I smaller than users dot length I plus plus. And then I'm going to say users at I equals new. Well, first of all, I'm going to say string ID equals integer toString I. Then I'm going to say users at I equals new user details, and I'm going to pass in string ID for the name, or for the ID I'm going to pass in I. For the is contact, I'm going to always pass in true. for the name display name, I'm going to say user plus string ID. For the username, I'm going to pass in user underscore string ID. For the avatar URL, I'm going to pass in http://gravatar or www. Go away so you guys can see that. gravatar.com/avatar/plus string ID plus question mark D equals ident icon. And those are our 10 users. So all of the fake messages that we're going to be making are going to be from these fake 10 users, basically. So next up, I'm going to say random equals new random. Then I'm going to say calendar date equals calendar.getInstance, which will get the Gregorian calendar in this case. Then I'm going to say date.add calendar.days. Where are you? Date minus 100. So this will make us go back in time by 100 days. And then I'm going to say for int I equals 0, I smaller than 100, I plus plus. And then I'm going to say boolean is from us. And I'm going to say if request.include received messages and request.include sent messages, then is from us is a toss-up. It's going to be random.nextBoolean. Otherwise, I'm going to say is from us equals not request.include received messages. Then I'm going to say date.set calendar.minute, and I'm going to set the minute to random.nextInt between 0 and 60 times 24. Then I'm going to say string number string equals integer.toString I for our counter. And I'm going to say responses.messages.add new message. And I'm going to break this up because this is going to be a really long line. The ID will be I. The created at is going to be cast to calendar date.clone. Because date is a reference type and it's a mutable reference type. We got to make sure we clone it. Then I'm going to say short message number string for the message. And I'm going to say long message number string for the long message. And for the image, I'm just going to leave in blank. We're not going to worry about fake images in this case. Then from the image, or from the other user is going to be users at random.nextInt users.length. So we'll pick a random user out of the users we generated. And then for the is from us, we'll say is from us. And our is red is, I'm going to say, if I is greater than 4, then is red will be set to true. So the final thing I want to do is all the way at the end, I'm going to say post delayed response, and we're going to say 2 seconds. So it'll take 2 seconds to get our list of messages. So yeah, so that is how we're going to get fake messages. All right, so I'll scroll around here for just a sec if you guys want to hit pause. Otherwise, I guess it is time to go on to the activity layout. So I'm going to open up resource layout, and I'm going to open up activity sent messages. And for this guy, pretty much all of it's going to say the same, except right here in the center, what I want to have happen is I want to create a frame layout with the recycler view and then another frame layout inside of it. So I'm going to say frame layout with the width of match parent, a height of match parent. And then I'm going to say android.support.v7.widget.recyclerView. And the recycler view is going to have an ID of activity sent messages. And he's going to have a layout width of match parent and a height of match parent. And I'm also going to go ahead and give him vertical scroll bars as well. So we're going to say app scroll bars here, or Android scroll bars. Anyway, so that's our recycler view right there. You'll see the recycler view is not going to render properly, but that's okay. Then after the recycler view, I'm going to create another frame layout with the match parent, width and height. I'm going to give this guy a background of 81D4FA. I'm going to give him a clickable of true and an ID of, guess what I'm going to give the ID of? Progress frame. And then inside the progress frame, I'm going to have a progress view with the wrap content, indeterminate only, set to true, gravity set to center. Or layout gravity set to center. Anyway, so that was fun. Now we have all of our awesome stuff ready to go. So we have a progress view that we can, or a progress frame that we can show and hide, and we have a recycler view that we can use as well. So now, for the final bit, is let's go ahead and jump all the way up to our activities and our sent messages activity right here, and let's finish him up. So he is going to have a private static final int request view message. So basically, when we click on a message in our sent message activity, we're going to open up another activity where we can delete a message. And if we delete a message, I want the sent message activity to be notified of that message being deleted so that it can simply remove that message from the UI and not have to re-request all of the messages. All right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say private message adapter. I'm going to say private array list of messages. And then I'm going to say private view progress frame. Now, inside of the constructor, after we set up our all this fun stuff, I am going to go ahead and set the title. I'm going to say get support action bar dot set title sent messages. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here. And I guess then what we're going to do is we are going to instantiate my adapter. So I'm going to say adapter equals new message adapter, passing in this for the activity and also this for the on-click listener. Now that's going to require that we implement that on-click listener interface, but we'll do that in a second here. Then I'm going to say messages equals adapter.getMessages. Then I'm going to say recycler view equals cast to recycler view, find view by ID, r.id.messages. We need to make sure r is imported. We'll say messages. Then I'm going to say recycler view dot set adapter. Then I'm going to do something interesting. I'm going to say if is tablet, then recycler view dot set layout manager new grid layout manager, passing in this for the context and 2 for the span count. Otherwise, recycler view set layout manager new linear layout manager. So this way you see that, whoops, we have to pass in this right there. Now you see that the flexibility of decoupling the layout manager from the recycler view itself. Notice how now we can determine if we're on a tablet, we want to show a grid layout, but when we're on a phone, we want to show just a single column layout. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and get our progress frame. So I'm going to say progress frame equals find view by ID, r.id messages progress frame. And that almost wraps up this method. I want to go ahead and schedule. So I'm going to say scheduler dot post every milliseconds. And I'm going to pass in a new instantiation of messages dot search messages request, passing in true for include sent messages and false for include received messages. So what is going on here? Well, oops, I also have to pass in the long milliseconds. So long milliseconds, I'm going to do 1,000, because 1,000 milliseconds in a second. And then I'm going to do 60 seconds in a minute. And then I'm going to do 4 or 3. Yeah, whatever comes out of my fingers is fine. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm saying every 3 minutes, go ahead and refresh our messages. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up this method. There isn't a whole lot to it. Let's go ahead and put our keyboard cursor right on these squigglies and hit Alt-Enter. And say make sent messages activity implement our on-click listener. And then we'll hit OK. So now we have a method that gets invoked whenever our messages are clicked. So what do we want to have happen when our messages are clicked? Well, basically all we want to do is display the message activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say intent equals new intent, and I'm going to pass in this for the context, and I'm going to say message activity dot class. Now message activity doesn't exist yet, but it will here in a second. And then I'm going to say intent dot put extra message activity dot class, comma, or sorry, or not dot class, dot extra message. So we're passing along the message in with the extra field. And then I'm going to say start activity for result intent. And then for our request code, I'm going to say request view message. Okay, before we move on here, what I want to do is I want to implement my message activity, or at least stub it out. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to right-click my activities package, select new Java class, and I'm going to say message activity. Now, message activity is going to inherit from base authenticated activity, which of course will require that we implement on your create. However, I'm not going to fill on your create in with anything. We'll just leave it blank for now. However, there are some things I need to do at the top. I need to create my public static final string extra message, so we can pass the message along with the intent. Public static final int request image deleted, which is going to be a request code that'll be sent back in the case that the user deleted that image. Then I'm going to say public static final string result extra message ID. So what message was deleted? What are we? So result extra message ID. Now we'll definitely be filling in all of these this entire activity out later, but for now we're just going to keep it as it is, and we're going to jump back into our sent message activity, because now our code will compile, but also we can implement our onActivity result method. So I'm going to hit Alt Insert overriding methods onActivity result and hit enter, and it's going to go ahead and just generate this method stub here for me. And I'm going to say if request code does not equal request view message, or result code does not equal message activity dot request image deleted, then return. So this code will only execute if we are getting a result for our view message and it is the status code was request image deleted. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say int message ID equals data dot get int extra, passing in message activity dot result extra message ID. If the message ID equals -1, return. I want to set the default to -1 here, so make sure you add comma -1 to the invocation of get int extra. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to really quickly do something kind of a little inefficient here, but it'll work for our purposes. I'm going to say for int I equals 0, I smaller than messages dot size I plus plus. I'm going to say message equals messages get I. If message dot get ID equals message ID, then I'm going to say adapter. Or sorry, if it does not equal message ID, then I'm going to say continue. And then at the end here, I'm going to say adapter dot messages dot remove at position I, adapter dot notify item removed at position I, and then break. So we're doing a really inefficient linear search over our messages array. However, that's fine. If you guys wanted to implement anything a little bit more performant, you are welcome to. Okay, the last thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and implement our receiver for this event. So we need to subscribe to the search message response event. So I'm going to say subscribe public void on messages loaded. And for the parameter, it'll simply be messages dot search message response response. First thing I'm going to do is say response dot show error toast this, so show the error if there was any. Then I'm going to say messages dot clear messages dot add. Or sorry, how about do it this way? I'm going to say messages dot clear. Then I'm going to say adapter dot notify item range removed 0 to messages dot size. Whoops, we have to alias that out first before we do the clear. So I'll say old messages size equals messages size, old messages size. Then I'm going to say messages.add all, passing in response.messages. Then I'm going to say adapter.notify item range added, inserted, with a position start of 0 and a position end of messages.size. So this will show, this by doing it in this order, this will show an animation for those items being removed if this was a refresh then being re-added. Maybe you don't want that, maybe you do. Either way, that's pretty easy way to implement that. Alrighty, so now for the moment of truth, let's go ahead and hit run and bring over my virtual machine. Ooh, we got an error. What did I do wrong here? No resource identifier found attribute card quarter. It should have been corner, so card corner radius. Oh, I see autocomplete decided to show up there just at the last minute. Just fix that typo and go ahead and hit run, and hopefully this will work. Go ahead and use that. Go ahead and go to sent messages, and we get our spinning guy, and in 2 seconds, ooh, I did totally forget to hide the progress frame. So let's jump back into our sent messages activity, and on messages loaded, I'm going to say progress frame dot set visibility view gone. Then what I'm going to do to launch the app, I'm going to right click my sent messages activity and say run sent messages activity. So I'm going to just launch directly into that activity, which, because we've designed this app properly so far, won't be a problem. Give it a sec, or rather 2 seconds. And the progress frame is really not liking to go away. So let's go ahead and figure out what's going on here. You know what? I didn't register the in-memory service again. All right, let's head over to our module, and down here in the register method, I'm going to say new in-memory message service application. So sorry about that. This is like the fourth or third, probably, based on the fact that we only have 3 services, time I've done that. And I sit there and I'm scratching my head. I was like, why isn't it working? I really got to commit that to memory, that potential bug to memory. All right, now let's wait 2 seconds and check that out. We have our messages. Not only do we have our messages, also note how our unread messages are different looking than our read messages. And if we click on a message, we get an exception. And the exception is because, of course, I totally forgot to add the activity, the message activity, to my manifest. So we'll simply say message activity and make that a self-closing tag. Okay, I think that pretty much wraps this video up. Not a whole lot else to say. We got our set messages activity working, and we've shown how we can use our awesome new messages adapter to display messages. So that's pretty exciting. And I guess we'll see you guys in the next video.